Thanks, Jerome. The original coronavirus out of Wuhan, in its natural state, infected 2.5 people for every case. It's always been the case that only a minority of people pass it on to anyone at all, maybe 30%. But that 30% who are more significantly infectious pass on to several people, and there are clearly those super spreader events as well, especially indoors, especially when crowded, especially if there's shouting or singing or very close contact. So that's the normal mechanism of transmission, and one case passing it on to 2.5 people is exponential growth. That gets to thousands within weeks. We're now looking at a virus that, again, reports are 40 to 70% more infectious than the previous variants that have been normal. Whether it's 40% or 70%, that is disturbing, and we don't want this variant of concern, the B117, first identified in the UK, to be in the community and transmitting, because a 40% increase in infectiousness, again, even from a minority of people, is hugely significant. So we just need to shut it down regardless. But it is a minority of individuals who pass it on to others. So there will be some who pass it on to no one else in their household despite being in close contact. There'll be others who pass it on to everyone in their household and are at risk of passing it on in social events or even in casual exposure sites. That's why we're just assuming that everyone here is significantly infectious and might pass it on in an open airport setting, might pass it on in a cafe, and absolutely at risk in a household setting. But in each and every circumstance, we are identifying those individuals, we are shutting down their close contacts and the contacts of those contacts on that basis.
On Friday morning, Minister Foley said that there was wastewater detected in Coburg. Do you now believe that it's as a result of the dysfunction on 6th of February?
We can't say for sure. So it was a relatively early detection in Coburg. We're still encouraging everyone in Coburg and surrounds to step up for testing if symptomatic, absolutely step up for testing, as we've said, if there are an identified contact of an exposure site. So we make no assumptions and say, oh, it's all explained, nothing to be concerned about here. We absolutely encourage everyone in those wastewater sites, again on the website, and as Jerome has listed, to come forward for testing.
We've got to say that there were no known cases, but a number of close contacts in those areas. Were those close contacts of people who had attended the venue?
Some of them will be close contacts of people who attended that venue, yes. And again, we're going through the testing process, and all others at that venue have tested negative. So that's encouraging. There's a couple that are still pending amongst all of those close family and social contacts. So 127 out of 129 is a pretty good wrap up, but we need to tie them all off.
So CQV were tested positive on the Wednesday. I'm assuming the viral fragments are detected on Wednesday and then reported Thursday. And then we only find out about the Coburg venue on Friday night. Why the delay? It's almost 2.5 days.
So the Coburg venue wasn't in scope because of that negative test the day after the event took place. So the event took place on the 6th. There was a negative test on the 7th. We now know, looking back and with reference laboratory testing of that sample, that it was a weak positive. So it's in getting another case out of that setting that we identified that transmission might have occurred there. That's why we went back and retested that sample from the CQV worker who tested negative on the 7th. But when you've got a negative test the day after an event, it's not in scope as an exposure site for someone who's potentially infectious, because you don't imagine them to be infectious.
Given the nature of the situation that Victoria is in at the moment with a lockdown, how can we feel confident that the system is working when we've got a negative test result that's resulted in a full week of potential exposure in lots of different environments, including a childcare centre, swimming pools, really highly populated and frequented areas?
Because we're testing 20,000 plus people every day, because 127 of 129 close household and social contacts are already tested, have already returned negative results, because we're identifying in record time cases from the time that they're testing, getting them interviewed, and having their close contacts isolated. As Jerome said, there are rare false positives, there are rare false negatives. We have to accept that that will occur. When we get new information, we reinvestigate, we reinterrogate those tests, those exposure sites, in order to be agile in our response. That's entirely appropriate.
Is it a failure in the
A week
system?
delay is surely not record time.
Sorry?
A week delay
A week delay in what?
in contacting this person.
So this individual tested negative after the event. So what do you expect us to do in those circumstances? We do not have exposure sites for people who return negative tests. All we can do is remain alert to any other result that comes through, to investigate those results, to find out how transmission might have occurred, and to wrap the public health response around those close contacts, which is exactly what we've done.
How do we feel confident, though, that that isn't happening on a fairly frequent basis, that those tests aren't coming back wrong and therefore exposing over several days? As what we're seeing here, this is now the highest amount of cases connected to one particular site.
Yeah, because we've got those 20,000 tests coming in every day, the vast majority of which are negative. So of 20,000 tests, all but 2 yesterday were negative. And we are not seeing other cases that are linked to negative tests. It is highly unusual to get a negative test on someone who was later found to be positive and in fact transmitted to other people. To be a weak positive, but to be infectious enough to actually cause infection in other people at an event is very unusual. But again, we have to accept the reality of that, be really agile in our response, understand that that was a transmission event, and wrap the public health response around everyone who was there.
So what was the trigger here? Was it because one of those family members at that event tested positive further down the track, or was it because that CQV worker was identified as a close contact of another CQV worker? No,
so that CQV worker was quarantined after the event because they worked at CQV and the Holiday Inn was shut down and everyone was considered a close contact. But there was another individual at that event who tested positive, which made us reinterrogate that initial negative result.
How concerned are you about this event turning into a super spreading event? The venue's not a very big venue. There's 38 people. Presumably they were singing and dancing, a very close contact.
Yeah, so clearly whenever you have an event where you've already seen transmission occur, you are highly focused on it, as we should be. The reassuring thing thus far is that there are a number of negative tests for those individuals. They are all in quarantine now. We'll actually retest them multiple times before the end of their quarantine period because we know it's an at-risk event. But because they're all quarantined and because we've got all of those negative tests back at the moment, that's very reassuring. But we're going to be very highly focused on this event and this cohort of individuals who, again, as Jerome said, have been fantastic in their cooperation with the department.
Are we revisiting other negative swabs now as well?
No. So if there's new information that links someone to an individual who we thought would be at risk and returned a negative test, we could reinterrogate that. But this is an exceptionally rare occurrence, but we would always follow the epidemiology that would make us need to reinterrogate any aspect of the response.
It sounds like the tracing efforts have improved significantly from last year. The metrics you read out before, they're quite reassuring, I think, to a lot of people.
They should be.
And we're not seeing a lot of negative, we're seeing a lot of negative tests coming back. Does that suggest that the snap lockdown across the entire state was maybe a little bit of an overreaction?
This is a high stakes game when a virus that has caused devastation across the Northern Hemisphere and many other countries in the world and may soon be the predominant variant of concern globally, we cannot afford to be wrong here. As the Premier's said, and I can only reinforce it, we do not want to be in a situation a week from now, 2 weeks from now, where we said, oh, we wish we'd done that, because we've now got mystery cases, multiple wastewater detections, or cases that are beyond us. We have to be precautionary. It's an awful situation to have a circuit breaker of any kind, but it's done because we must get on top of this. There is really no alternative. We do not want to be in a situation where, again, I don't want to make comparisons with Europe. We are not Europe. Most of Australia has really been free of community transmission for most of the last few months. But they have been in some kind of lockdown for 13 months of one kind or another. We do not want to be in a situation where there is ongoing community transmission that we are just trying to manage through rolling lockdowns.
Do you have any concern about the tennis player that's arrived in South Africa and now testing positive to COVID-19?
I don't think so. We've had these circumstances before where we've had notification through the national focal point, again under the international health regulations, that means that countries identify other countries where they think the virus might have originated. They've all been found to be not real results. So there are countries that do rapid antigen testing, not as sensitive, not as specific as the nasopharyngeal PCR swabs that we do. This particular individual tested negative on the day of departure, but was on a long flight, mixed with other international travellers, again, with a significant risk of cases potentially on the subsequent legs of that flight. We will go through the normal process through the National Incident Room to inquire of all of the information that South Africa can provide, and we'll tie off those ends, but I don't think it's a real result.
Minister Foley, would you like to comment on the Australian Open as well and what this means for